What is your fake it till you make it story? Story 1. I'm an artist who works in the film industry. A few years ago, my wife got pregnant on purpose, and I needed to find a way to earn a more stable income while she was on maternity leave and for the foreseeable future, since we both knew we wanted more than one child. I also wanted to stay in the film world if I could. I managed to get work as a grip, basically the person who does the heavy lifting on set and helps build and move large pieces of lighting equipment. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing at first. I started out on big productions like The Flash and Arrow. Then a friend got me a gig on a smaller set. And just 13 days into working as a grip, which I hadn't mentioned was all the experience I had, they promoted me to key grip. For anyone unfamiliar with film lingo, that means I was suddenly the manager of the entire grip department, which handles half of all lighting setups. I basically faked it till I made it. Fast forward 5 years. I now have over 30 credits as a key grip. I own a full 5-ton truck's worth of gear that I rent out, which brings in about as much money per show as my old salary did. My wife is back at work after having our 2 kids, and I'm now a stay-at-home dad with steady passive income, plus the freedom to write and audition whenever I want. Story 2. I'd always been interested in programming. As a kid, I tried to teach myself C and Java with limited success. Fast forward to when I was 24, I was working as a piercing apprentice at a tattoo shop, making about $20 a day, a few days a week. Then I met a girl, fell for her, and she ended up pregnant. A few hours after the positive test, I was frantically applying for jobs on Craigslist. I found a posting for a PHP developer position just a few minutes away. I'd only ever messed around with PHP for a few hours in my life, but it was a tiny company and the interview wasn't technical. So I lied through my teeth the entire time and somehow got hired. Once I started, I genuinely tried to learn PHP on the job, but the owner had built his own PHP framework, and it was absolutely terrible. I couldn't make sense of it no matter how hard I tried. 2 weeks later, I got fired. Still, in those 2 weeks, I developed a real interest in web design and development. I reached out to a local web design company, offering my design services for free just to learn. On the same day I was fired, while walking home, I called them, and they actually hired me. I spent about a year there learning everything I could before moving on to better paying jobs. 10 years later, I'm now a lead software engineer on a major project, making just over 6 figures. If that pregnancy test hadn't scared me half to death that day, I'd probably still be stuck in dead-end jobs, scraping together money for weed and beer. Story 3. A while ago, I decided to stop just complaining about environmental destruction and climate change, and actually do something. So, I started planting trees. Keep in mind, I had 0 experience. I'd never gardened before, and I always joked about having a brown thumb. But I did some research, and it looked simple enough, except everything I planted died. I followed the instructions exactly, but nothing survived. I babied those trees, did everything by the book, and still, maybe half would make it through their first year. But I didn't stop. I kept planting and faking that I knew what I was doing. Then I came across the work of Dr. Elaine Ingham on soil science, and it completely changed the game for me. It made perfect sense. Ecosystems evolve from barren land to weed fields to grasslands to brushlands and finally to forests. And as they do, the soil microbiology changes too. Dead soil becomes bacterial-dominated and eventually fungal-dominated as you approach a true forest ecosystem. So the key to planting trees isn't just digging a hole. It's transforming the soil into forest soil first. In nature, this process takes thousands of years. Weeds grow and die, grasses grow and die, then small shrubs take over, and finally, woody plants appear. Once you have enough woody debris on the ground, fungus moves in, and that's the tipping point. The system naturally transitions into a forest from there. So the right way to plant a tree is to mimic that. Speed up the process by covering the ground with wood chips and letting the soil chemistry change. After a few months, or better yet, a year, then you plant your trees into an environment they actually want to live in. That understanding changed everything. Now, I go around planting mini starter forests everywhere on my land in wild areas and abandoned lots. I've watched those little patches of life grow from a few saplings into thriving thickets. Once they take hold, they become self-sustaining, and the land begins to heal itself. It's an incredibly rewarding hobby, but one that requires respect and responsibility. Every time you plant something, you're setting big changes in motion, so you have to know what you're planting. That's why I only use local native species, trees, shrubs, herbs, flowers, plants that already belong here. It's better for the ecosystem, easier to sustain, and best of all, free. The seeds are right there around you. What's truly rewarding is driving to work and seeing a bird perched on an apple tree I planted, surrounded by buzzing bees, haskap, lovage, borage, strawberries, asparagus, and clover, a living, breathing fruit tree guild. Seeing new apple saplings pushing up through the sweet Sicily and realizing the ecosystem is now self-replicating, sequestering carbon and healing the soil long after I'm gone. I started out as someone who couldn't keep a plant alive, and now I have thriving pockets of life scattered around my community, living ecosystems that I help set in motion. That's a legacy. That's how we fight climate change, not just by talking about it, but by planting the future with our own hands. Story 4. I enlisted in the Army in my late 20s, and after a couple of deployments to Iraq in my 30s, I decided to make it my career. I wasn't particularly gung-ho. I know that's more of a Marine thing, but you get the idea. I just genuinely liked being in the Army and enjoyed the people I worked with. And apparently, they liked working with me too. Eventually, I got wounded. It was one of those Forrest Gump situations. I was discharged, but I wasn't seriously messed up. So there I was in my mid-30s, suddenly back in the civilian world with almost no real job experience, and right as the economy tanked. I used a GI Bill to go to college. Thanks to a few community college credits I'd earned before enlisting, and by taking full course loads every semester, even in the summers, I managed to get my bachelor's degree in information science and technology with a minor in business in just 3 years. After graduation, I hustled. I took every temp job I could find just to build experience in a corporate setting. Somehow, and I still don't really know how, I ended up landing one-year contracts with some huge, well-known companies. I started with basic data entry, moved into data analysis, and eventually found my niche in payroll processing. All this from a high school dropout Gen X slacker who spent most of his 20s working dead-end jobs, singing in a punk band, and smoking weed every day. When I first started college after the Army, I barely knew how to do anything on a computer beyond browsing the internet and playing video games. My most impressive pre-Army job title was Assistant Third Shift Stock Manager at a grocery store. But I kept faking it until I made it, and now I've made it to the point where companies are calling me, try to lure me away from my current job to head up their payroll departments. Story 5. I took an entry-level job as a sysadmin after spending 8 years working as a technical writer. At the time, I only knew Windows from a basic end-user perspective, and I'd barely touched Linux, and only through the GUI, never the command line. I was upfront about all this in my interview, but I must have managed to convey how eager I was to learn and take on the challenge because they hired me anyway. A friend of mine, who was a senior sysadmin there, vouched for me even though he knew I had zero experience. I was offered a rock-bottom salary for a sysadmin, though still a 20% bump from my writing job since nobody really values technical documentation, and thrown straight into the deep end. The environment was a mix of a small Windows server base, some ancient HBUX 11 physical machines, and a moderate RHEL 5 and 6 VM infrastructure. One of the older sysadmins took me under his wing and showed me the basics, how to navigate the command line, use 6, and handle simple tasks. I was also immediately enrolled in an online RHEL 6 course right after orientation. A lot of it went over my head at first, but I studied like crazy and kept pushing through. That mentor ended up being fired a couple of months later for refusing to adapt to new technologies, but I'll always be grateful to him for getting me started. Over the next 3 years, I threw myself into the work completely. I learned everything I could, took on extra responsibilities, and even completed a master's in IT with a focus on IT service management, since moving into management was my long-term goal. The big turning point came when my manager stepped down to a senior sysadmin role. and another co-worker, a nice guy, but an absolute stress case with zero composure and a serious drinking problem, was promoted to manager. He tried his best, but it was rough. The team didn't respect him, and morale went downhill. By then, I'd learned enough about management theory to recognize what wasn't working, even if I didn't yet have the practical experience to fix it. During one of my monthly check-ins with my boss's boss, he asked me candidly how I thought the new manager was doing. I answered honestly, said I thought he struggled with decision-making and team buy-in, and that some formal management training might really help him. Apparently, others felt the same way because not long after, they sent him to a 2-week management boot camp. He did come back a little improved, but the team dynamics had shifted. People started walking all over him. I was getting frustrated, so I began updating my resume and applying for other jobs in town. Eventually, I landed a new position at a much larger company with a better budget and IT infrastructure, plus a significant pay raise. When I gave notice, my boss's boss called me in and offered a $5,000 raise and a team lead position, essentially helping the struggling manager do his job. It was a kind gesture, but nowhere near the new salary offer, so I declined. I told him I was incredibly grateful for the opportunity and everything I'd learned, but was ready to take on a new challenge. He told me I'd always be welcome back, and it felt sincere. My manager didn't take it as well. I think he had been relying on me to keep things afloat. At my farewell happy hour, he drank himself into a complete stupor. Looking back, I consider myself incredibly lucky. I made a massive career switch in my 30s, and while those first few years were brutal, constantly trying to catch up to colleagues with a decade more experience, it paid off. I'm now up for promotion to senior, and while I still get imposter syndrome sometimes, especially around people my age who've been in IT forever, I think I'm doing pretty damn well. Now, I've got to stop reminiscing and get back to work. Story 6. Honestly, university as a whole. I went to one of the more difficult and somewhat prestigious universities in Hungary, but I wasn't exactly the most hardworking student. What I was, though, was confident, and that made all the difference. Don't get me wrong, you still have to study. You'll still have sleepless nights even if you plan everything perfectly. But confidence is absolutely key. Confidence in the knowledge you do have. Confidence when walking into exams or classes. Confidence to speak up, though obviously you can't just say anything stupid. Be creative, make friends, be kind to professors. A little bit of cockiness never hurts. If you can balance cockiness, confidence, and kindness, you'll save yourself a lot of stress. One time at uni, I had an exam in a subject that was slightly related to literature, something I couldn't have cared less about. My usual study method was unorthodox, to say the least. I'd sleep through the afternoon the day before the exam, wake up around 3 or 4 a.m., and cram as much as I could before heading in. That morning, I woke up, followed my method, and went to the university for the exam. There were 18 topics total, and the very last one was Ben Jonson, someone I knew nothing about. I figured, well, one blank spot out of 18 can't hurt. What are the odds? You already know where this is going. I get called up, and yep, Ben freaking Jonson. Just my luck. The professor was notorious for being strict and distant, and I'd never had a class with him before. I'd never even met the guy, so there was no chance of relying on a good impression. As he handed me the blank sheet of paper to write my essay, all I could think was, we could have saved this tree, professor. It was late spring, the weather was beautiful. There was a kindergarten next to the exam room. I could hear the kids laughing, birds chirping, sunlight streaming through the window, warm on the back of my neck. I swear, I didn't think about Ben Jonson for even a second. I was daydreaming about the burger I'd get after the exam, the sauce I'd choose, and the cute girl who always flirted with me when I went there. When it was finally my turn for the oral part, I handed him my nearly blank paper. The only thing written on it was my name. The professor looked at it and said, "Well, that's promising." I couldn't even be embarrassed. I just laughed. The only fact I knew about Jonson was that he was Shakespeare's contemporary. So that's exactly what I said. Somehow, the conversation shifted. We started talking about the previous night's Champions League match, our favorite beers, and even joked about how every girl at the university had a crush on him. To be fair, he was pretty fit. After saying literally one sentence about the actual topic, I somehow walked away with a grade of 4 out of 5. As I was leaving, the professor smiled and said, "Daniel, you're clearly not stupid. Next time we meet, would you be so kind as to actually read the topic once so I can give you a 5? And that's when I realized sometimes confidence really does carry you further than knowledge. Story 7. I moved to a new city right after college. New state, knew absolutely no one. I spent 2 weeks desperately looking for both a job and a place to live, surviving entirely off a gas credit card that, thankfully, also covered food and the occasional cheap motel. But the problem was a loop. No one would rent me a place without a job, and no one would hire me without a permanent address. Eventually, I maxed out the card and ran out of cash completely. So, defeated, I decided I'd head back home the next morning. But the night before leaving, I thought, you know what? Screw it. I'm spending my last $10 doing something I've never done before. So I walked into a strip club, the first one I'd ever been to. I was from a tiny town, so the whole experience was brand new to me. I paid the $10 cover, sat down, ready to enjoy what little entertainment my last few dollars could buy, and then the server came over to take my drink order. That's when she mentioned there was a 2-drink minimum. Problem, I had 0 money left. Instead of admitting that and walking out like a normal person, I panicked and blurted out, "Oh, I'm actually here applying for a job." She looked at me skeptically and said, "As what, a dancer?" "No," I said, trying to sound confident. "As a DJ." She nodded slowly and walked away. I thought I'd dodged a bullet. Time to enjoy the show. But no. A minute later, she came back with a massive guy who introduced himself as the manager. He shook my hand and said, "So, you're the DJ? Funny timing. We actually need one right now." I froze. He told me he'd need to hear me on the mic before making a decision, but if I sounded good, I could start the next day. "So, you want to hear me now?" I asked. Next thing I knew, I was standing in the DJ booth, doing my absolute best impression of the guy who'd been working when I walked in. Basically 8 minutes of me trying to sound like I knew what I was doing. Somehow it worked. He hired me on the spot. The manager even helped me find an apartment by lying to the leasing office, saying I'd been working at the club for 6 months. It was mostly a cash business, so after every shift, I walked out with money in hand and slowly figured out the job as I went. I stayed there for 6 months, saved up, and got my life together. Eventually, I talked my way into a bar DJ gig, which taught me a whole new skill set, then a nightclub job. Fast forward to today. I've been named one of the top 3 DJs in Nashville, Tennessee, for the 2nd year in a row, won multiple national awards for DJing and production, and now run my own company. All of it, every opportunity, every twist of fate, started because I wanted to see boobs before going home to my mom's house. Story 8. When I was 16, I actually managed to fake being sick well enough to fool a doctor. It was the end of the school year, finals week. I had already failed 3 classes and was on the verge of failing philosophy too. The morning of the exam, I overslept and completely panicked. As I ran to school, I was already coming up with an excuse, the classic, "I woke up feeling really sick" story. While I got there, they told me I could only take the makeup exam if I brought a doctor's note dated that same day. Instead of panicking more, I didn't even go home. I walked straight to a small local clinic near my house, one of those mini hospital type places. After walking for about an hour, I found out I could only see a doctor for free if I had a partner card, which of course I didn't. So I walked another 2 hours back home, grabbed my documents, applied for the damn card, and went back to the clinic. After waiting in line for an hour, I finally got called in to see the doctor. By that point, I had perfected what I thought was a master-level performance. I told her I'd eaten at a sketchy burger joint the night before and woke up with explosive diarrhea. It was perfect, easy to fake, hard to disprove, and believable enough that I didn't need to look like I was dying. Luckily, I already looked half dead anyway. I was skinny, exhausted, and hadn't eaten all day. She even took my blood pressure and said it was really low, which just made my story even more convincing. In the end, she gave me the note, prescribed some meds, and I took the exam 2 days later. Passed philosophy and all my other classes too. Honestly, it's still one of my proudest moments, my greatest performance before adulthood. Story 9. I've always liked cars, and honestly, I've always liked guys who are into cars. You can probably guess where this is going. The truth is, I was the stereotypical girl who knew absolutely nothing. I was terrible. I'd lie and pretend I did, repeating stuff I'd heard from my dad or my brother, or quoting lines from car shows and movies. Basically, I'd just regurgitate whatever any car guy said to me and hope it sounded convincing. But here's the thing, all that pretending actually started to pay off. I listened so much, trying to memorize what people were saying, that eventually I started to understand it. I began learning from TV shows instead of just half watching them. Then I started working on my own car with my dad. A few years later, I got hired at a tire shop during their busy season. I walked in with the most basic set of skills, practically nothing, but to my surprise, I picked things up fast. I learned how to do the work properly, and I got good at it. I can now take a full set of tires off the rims, remount, balance, and reinstall them on a car in about 45 minutes. Power tools used to terrify me. Now I love them. Just this past summer, the thermostat and water outlet housing gasket seal on my Mazda 3 broke. Because the engine had shifted a bit, fixing it meant dealing with some nightmare bolts and actually lifting the engine. And I did it. On my own. Okay, with help from about a dozen YouTube tutorials. Thank you, Faye Hadley and A1 Auto. But still, I did it. So yeah, fake it till you make it turned out to be more than just a phrase. I went from bluffing my way through car talk to genuinely diagnosing and fixing vehicles. Not just mine, but other people's too. And now, I can finally say I'm not faking it anymore. Story 10. Not exactly a fake it till you make it story, but it kind of fits. When I started year 11, I transferred to a new school and only had one friend from my old one. About halfway through the first semester, that friend bet me $200 to walk up to two girls we'd recently become friends with and come out to them as gay. For context, I'm straight, but I love bets and I'm pretty good at lying. The girls were both gay, though not together, which is why they were picked specifically. I was actually closer to them than my friend was, so I was the one who had to go through with it. So the next day I did it. I came out to them. It took about 5 minutes of convincing and 15 minutes of shock before they started hugging and comforting me. I even teared up a little, though honestly that was just because it was windy and I got dust in my eyes. Still, it made the whole act more believable, so I wasn't complaining. The rule of the bet was that they had to believe I was gay until graduation. Easy, right? Turns out it was really easy. I didn't even have to act different. I just figured being gay wouldn't actually change the way I behaved. And honestly, it was kind of fun. Whenever someone said something homophobic and the girls were around, I'd laugh and play along just to see their reactions. Every single time, they'd look at me to see if I was okay, and I'd just give them a grin. Over time, though, things changed. We became really close. By the time graduation came around, those girls were two of my best friends, along with my original buddy. The plan had always been to tell them the truth at the end of school, but when the moment came, I couldn't do it. The thought of losing their trust or friendship terrified me. My friend told me, "Do whatever you want, man. Doesn't matter to me. You're stuck with me either way." That helped, but I still couldn't bring myself to come clean. So I didn't. We graduated, and I just let it be. But the guilt never really went away. Even back in high school, whenever I was hooking up with someone, I'd get anxious thinking the girls might suddenly drop by unannounced and find out the truth. I was constantly scared that one day they'd discover everything and our friendship would fall apart. Because, after all, the whole thing started with a lie. Now, years later, I still don't know what to do. It's not exactly a fake it till you make it situation, because, honestly, I don't even know what making it would look like anymore. Story 11. This was years ago, back when I was younger and home computers were just starting to become common. I got hired by a major holiday resort, one that employed hundreds of people in a small community, as an on-call babysitter. I typed up my resume on my dad's computer instead of using a typewriter, which was still kind of novelty at the time. About a month into my babysitting job, I got a call from the accounts department. They said, "We saw on your resume that you know how to use a computer. Would you be interested in interviewing for a data entry position?" I said sure, because why not? More work meant more money. I could use a computer well enough and type pretty fast, so they hired me to enter invoices and general data into their system. I did that for about a year, and then the accounts receivable clerk left. Since I've been sitting next to her the whole time and we talked a lot, I already had a pretty good idea of what she did. I filled in just until they found a replacement. They never did, so I got promoted, full-time hours, and a raise. 2 years later, one of the assistant accountants left. I filled in again. No replacement. Another promotion. Then the actual accountant left, and well, you can probably guess what happened next. For about a year, until I left for a better paying, less stressful job. I was the accountant for a major holiday resort, handling hundreds of thousands of dollars in transactions every month, with absolutely no formal training. My only real qualification was that I could use a computer and was good at figuring things out as I went. There was a real certified accountant at the head office who signed off on everything I faxed him once a month, but that was about it. Eventually, when I moved to another resort to head their accounts receivable department, I started taking night classes because by then, I figured if I was going to keep doing this, I should probably actually learn how to be an accountant. Enjoy the video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.